The Philadelphia Phillies currently hold the second longest playoff drought in baseball. The last time Philadelphia made the postseason was back in 2011 when they had Ryan Howard and Roy Halladay. So it's safe to say it has been a pretty painful decade for Philadelphia fans. But heading into this season, Philadelphia has some promise. They're coming off an 82-win season, and in this offseason, they made some moves to improve off of last year's roster. They signed some of the biggest names on the market in Nick Castellanos and Kyle Schwarber. On top of that, they also filled a very big need in the closer position as they picked up Corey Knebel from LA. But let's go back and look at this team as a whole, starting with their offense. Let's start out with the catcher position where they have JT Realmuto, who, in my opinion, is the second best catcher in all of baseball, only behind Yasmani Grandal. Realmuto is a great offensive catcher. He can hit around 280 with 25 home runs, and he can also steal 10 bases. And he's also a very good defensive catcher, so Philadelphia is all set behind the plate with Realmuto. Over at first base, they have Rhys Hoskins, who is a pretty solid offensive player in terms of power, but he's not going to hit for the best average. And in terms of defense, he's not too great over there at first base either, but like I said, this guy has great power. Last year, he hit 27 home runs, and I could really see him hitting 30 home runs this year. Over at second base, they have Jean Segura, who throughout his career has been a pretty solid player all around. He had a great year last year where he hit 290 with 14 home runs. And going into this year, I wouldn't be surprised to see Segura replicate his 2021 season. Like I said before, he's been great all throughout his career, so I think he's all around a great player. Moving over to shortstop, this might be one of Philadelphia's weakest links. They have Didi Gregorius, who last year only hit 209. Now, in the past, Gregorius has shown us that he is capable of doing much better than he performed last year, but I think it's far-fetched to say he is going to bounce back to what he once was, but I do think he will be improved off of last year's numbers. Over at third base, they have Alec Boehm, who was a top prospect in the system just a couple years ago and had high expectations heading into last year. But he massively underperformed as he hit 247 with only 7 home runs, and he was sent down to AAA towards the end of the season. But Boehm can only get better from here. I don't think it's even possible to play worse than he did last year, so I think he is going to be improved this year. And looking at Philadelphia's outfield, this is where things get very good. They have the reigning National League MVP in Bryce Harper, who last year hit 307 with 35 home runs, 84 RBIs, and 13 stolen bases. Harper is clearly one of the best players in the game today, and he, in my eyes, is the best player on this team. As I mentioned before, they also have Kyle Schwarber, who last year hit 266 with 32 home runs. He has some of the best power in the game. Last year, he went on a crazy run where it seemed like he was hitting home run every single at-bat. And you can't forget about Nick Castellanos, who last year was an MVP candidate early on in the season. All in all, he hit 309 with 34 home runs and 100 RBIs. And I'm not too sure who they're going to play at DH at this point. I do think Odubel Herrera is an option, but he is going to be on the injured list to start out the year. But a couple years back, he was a pretty productive player, so I think he will be one of their top options. As a whole, this offense is very good. I think Philadelphia has a top 10 lineup on paper. Now let's take a look at their pitchers. In their starting rotation, they have some pretty solid arms. They have Aaron Nola, who last year was a disappointment. He had a 4.63 ERA, but I think it's crazy to think that he's going to have another down year like that. I think you could have an ERA hovering around 3. And also, with what Nola has shown us in the past, he's pretty much shown us he's capable of winning a Cy Young Award, so I think he will absolutely bounce back this year and be much better. They have Zach Wheeler, who last year had a career year in which he had a 2.78 ERA and finished top 3 in the National League Cy Young voting. If Wheeler is healthy all year long, I would not be surprised to see him have an all-star caliber year. I do think his numbers will dip a little bit from last year, but I still do think he will be a very good pitcher. They also have Ranger Suarez, who last year pitched to a 1.36 ERA. Now obviously he is going to regress from last year. He's not going to have a sub-2 ERA again, but he is a pretty solid pitcher, and I could see him having a 3.5 ERA and being a very productive pitcher for Philadelphia all year long. They also have Kyle Gibson, who they acquired from Texas at last year's deadline, who pitched pretty well for them down the stretch. All in all, Gibson had a 3.71 ERA last year, and I do think his ERA will go up a little bit this year, but I still think he's going to be a productive arm for Philadelphia. I could see his ERA being close to 4. And for their 5th and final option in their starting rotation, they have Zach Eflin, who will most likely miss the start of the year, but I think once he gets back and is fully healthy, he is going to be a good pitcher for Philadelphia. Last year, he had a 4.17 ERA, but if you watch any Philadelphia games, you know that Eflin has the potential to be a very good pitcher. He has flashes of dominance at times. And looking at their bullpen, this was Philadelphia's downfall last year. They had one of the worst bullpens in all of baseball, and it seemed like they could never lock down a lead and close a game out. But they did make some offseason acquisitions that improved this bullpen, in my opinion. I don't think it's going to be a great bullpen by any means, but if this bullpen is good enough and even league average, the Philadelphia Phillies are going to be a very good team. They picked up Corey Knebel, who I mentioned earlier from the Dodgers, who has previous closing experience with Milwaukee. All in all, Knebel had a 2.45 ERA last year, and I could see him being a productive closer for Philadelphia this year. They also picked up Brad Hand from Washington, who at this point is not what he once was, but I think he could thrive in the setup role. They also have a couple of other solid names in Jose Alvarado, Juris Familia, Connor Brogdon, Sir Anthony Dominguez, and Sam Coonrod. So like I said, this bullpen is by no means going to be one of the best in baseball, but I do think it could be towards the middle of the pack, and I really think that is all Philadelphia is asking for. So all in all, I think Philadelphia is a lot better than last year's 82-win team. Kyle Schwarber and Nick Castellanos are going to have a huge impact offensively, and their big issue last year was the bullpen, and like I said, they made some big acquisitions this offseason to fill that void. On top of that, I believe Aaron Nola will be much improved off of last year. I think Nola and Zach Wheeler could be one of the best 1-2 punches in all of baseball. So on paper, Philadelphia absolutely has the makings of a playoff team. Now, to answer the question, yes, I do think Philadelphia will end their 11-year playoff drought this year. I think the additions they made this offseason to go along with the names they currently have on their roster is good enough to get them to the postseason. It is definitely not going to be easy to make the postseason, however, because they will have to play a lot of their games against the Atlanta Braves and the improved New York Mets. But I believe in Philadelphia. I think they have the talent to do it, and I'm going for them this year. I think they're going to end the playoff drought. But anyways, that's going to wrap today's video up. Let me know what you guys think down below, whether you think Philadelphia is going to end the playoff drought or not. And I also wanted to let you guys know that within the next week or so, I'm going to be dropping my full 2022 season predictions. I'm going to be predicting every team's record, the MVP, the Cy Young, Rookie of the Year, World Series winner, all that good stuff. So stay tuned for that. And lastly, I want to thank you guys again so much for watching and continuing to support, and I'll see you next time.